Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, Daniel James, and as always, if you're new here, welcome. Today, I've got a very, very exciting guest, Steve Whittle. Now, Steve was the person that started my journey many, many years ago in the fitness space. And I've just told Steve off air that if it wasn't for Steve, I would not be the person I am today. So I owe a great deal of gratitude to our guest today. Steve Whittle is the founder of a men's mental health charity, Tough to Talk. Steve spent 13 years in the Royal Navy before moving into fitness and then into marketing. But in 2022, a personal crisis changed everything. After his own suicide attempt, Steve discovered his life's purpose, tackling the alarming fact that men make up 75% of all UK suicides. That's 10 men every single day. Through Tough to Talk, Steve has developed a completely different approach to reaching men who traditionally won't ask for help. He calls himself the man behind the mask, and today we're going to explore what that means, why conventional mental health messages fail men, and most importantly, how we can all better support the men in our lives. Steve, welcome to the show.
Yeah, no, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. And so up until you told me that story, I didn't realize what an impact I'd had on you. So I'm incredibly grateful, to have that like synaptic feedback that at least what we were doing back then was working.
But it's really interesting. And this is, again, I said this to you off air, that when I knew you, it was back at Virgin Active and you helped me become a fitness coach. And I said off air, I didn't like you. I actually would use the word I despised you. And it's all because you were pushing me out my comfort zone. I didn't like it. You were someone that was there, you were this leader, and you were, again, on the surface, very happy. Virgin had this thing called the oomph factor. So you were larger than life and you were forcing me to talk to strangers on a busy gym floor. And I hated it. You were pushing me out my comfort zone and I hated it. But you stood firm. You made me do it. And although, again, back then I probably, was a little bit of a shit, you stood by me and you knew that it was going to be good for me. And then fast forward to where I'm at now, had you not stuck with me, had you not pushed me out my comfort zone, I would not be doing what I do now. And more importantly, I wouldn't have had the impact and helped the people that I do. So the knock-on effect for you standing firm and actually guiding me through that process has actually led to this whole podcast and everything that I do now. So once again, thank you for that. And honestly, I'm forever grateful for you.
Oh, amazing. No, that's great. I'm so pleased that we stuck with it. I mean, it was a tough time back then. I mean, imagine you got all these really enthusiastic young people. And what we do is we get you all to agree that the best thing we need to do is serve our members. And to serve our members, we needed to be able to engage and talk with them. And we all agreed that. So then the hardest part was then is, well, if we all agree it, why aren't you doing it? And so you then had to break it down individually and coach the individuals to find out what their barriers were and find out solutions for them to be able to do it differently. And you're right, because I'm quite passionate and I'm also never going to let anything go. If we all agree that's the best thing to do, then let's really nail down, why are you not doing it? What are your barriers? So I can imagine that would be quite intense if you just don't let things go.
But again, it was the approach that was needed. And it's and the bizarre thing about this is you almost believed in all of us more than we believed in ourselves. And you trusted the process. Hey, there's a process. I've done this enough times. I know that if you stick with this, if you talk to enough people, if you get over that discomfort, if you get over that rejection, then actually you're going to be fine. And that's the thing that I found the most fascinating thing is the rejection, because so many people are afraid of rejection. And you were basically saying, go talk to that person. If they reject you, okay, well, they go talk to that person. Just get back on the horse and just start interacting with people. And I feel like it's such a lost art, just going and communicating with people. And as you said, we were all young people, most of us, again, 18 to 25. And you were just forcing us and giving us these really key life skills.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And the irony was that almost in every time you spoke to somebody new and engaged with them, you didn't get rejected. So we all had this massive fear of rejection, okay, which goes back to our caveman days. If you were rejected as a caveman, you were either didn't get fed or you were food. And so, and it's just this inbuilt thing. What if they say something horrible to me? But in almost every case, when you talk to somebody who's a stranger, if you do it in the right way, you never get rejected, because we all thrive on communication as long as it's appropriate.
I think that's the key thing as well, isn't it? We all kind of secretly want this connection with people, and even walking down the street, just saying hi to somebody. Like I try and make a point of it now when I'm at a supermarket or something. If I make eye contact with people, just saying hi. And for some people, you can kind of just see it's just the fact someone's noticed them. You can see that it's like, oh, that meant quite a lot. And again, it just, if you do get rejected, again, it's not the end of the world. Like the world hasn't ended, and that's also the key thing. If you do get rejected, which most of the time you didn't, okay, well, has the world ended? No, just go and talk to the next person, and it's fine.
True. I do the similar sort of thing. I smile at everybody, and I'm a massive smiler, and I make eye contact and I smile with everyone. And I'm 53 now, so I've been doing this forever. And only once in my life have I ever had a man in a supermarket who I've smiled at, then question me about it. You know, what are you smiling at? Like, what are you smiling at? And I just said, oh, because I'm a nice guy.
Yeah.
And then that's it. They go, oh. Well, I can't be upset. I can't be upset with somebody who's smiling because they're a nice guy, you know? So if one time in my entire life somebody's taken offense to smiling or, you know, a level of communication, then we're doing all right.
Exactly. And that's the key thing. It's just like, just keep on smiling, keep on being positive. But we're going to talk about that because there's also the danger of that as well. So we'll dive into that. But again, as much as we can, like I said, I think just putting that positivity out there, I don't think it can do any harm. Now,
nice.
Can you tell us what happened in 2022? Because this is the thing that changed everything for you and then led to you actually founding Tough to Talk. So can you sort of take us back and sort of paint a picture for my audience about what 2022 can look like for you?
So building up to 2022, I kind of built up a bit of a reputation as the kind of guy you can ask to do anything, you know, the go-to guy, you know. I call it my Instagram ready life, you know. So everything that you see me is what's on my Instagram. I am ready to go, you know. So we are, you know, 13 years in the Navy, then went into the fitness industry, then I went into marketing, you know, and I got, you know, I'm not afraid to get in front of the camera, not afraid to do, you know, to be out there. I've got 2 grown-up sons who I get, you know, I'm their go-to guy, and, you know, loads of friends and family who can always rely on me. I'm that guy. But then in 2022, my world kind of fell apart. So because what I had been hiding, and I call it the man behind the mask, and I believe that the majority of men that we're serving as a charity, you know, we believe that about 80% of all male suicides are functioning adults. So functioning adults are men who may have jobs, friends, family, and when they die by suicide, we often say things like, well, I never saw that coming, or I knew they were struggling with this, but I didn't realize it was that bad. So they are men behind the mask, like I was. And so what I'd been hiding all of my life was I've been hiding depression, which I'd had for 35 years, complex PTSD, that I didn't get diagnosed with until I was 49. So that was a year after 2022. I got diagnosed with hyperfocused ADHD, which would explain why I always felt like a square peg in a round hole. I was hiding all of this. I'd also made 2 previous attempts to take my life to 2022. One time when I was in the Navy, and one time once I'd left the Navy. And I felt ashamed. I felt like a loser because the one thing I had control over was whether I lived or died. And I just buried it and added that to all of my problems. So fast forward to 2022, I make my 3rd attempt to take my life. And I haven't hidden this story. You can go to our website and read the story, or you can see it in our Man Up book. And I just had one moment of clarity where I made a phone call to get help. And I didn't know what I was going to say, but it didn't matter. They were amazing. They knew exactly what to say. And they then said to me, the crisis team are on their way to you. And then I was like, oh, shit. My boss is going to find out. My boys are going to find out. My girlfriend, who I'd been with for 6 years at that point, had no idea of all of these things. I'd hid it all. My mum was going to find out. My whole world was now collapsing around my ears. The whole mask was about to come down. And that fear, that vulnerability just was so overwhelming. And as soon as the crisis team turned up, I told them, I'm fine. I'm really sorry I bothered you. And of course, they didn't accept any of my nonsense. They're trained professionals. They came into the house, they sat me down, and I can't remember much about the conversations. I know there was talks about drugs, immediate support. I know I had to spend 2 hours with them, convincing them that I didn't need to be taken away. And so I remember they kept saying to me, "You are not alone. Lots of men feel this way." I just thought that's rubbish. That's utter rubbish. All of my time in the Navy, all my time working in the fitness industry and marketing, all these areas I worked were all mostly men, male centric. I don't know any men that have ever said to me, "I feel like dying. My life is so bad. I have no value. I have no purpose. I wish I was dead." I don't know any men who are saying that. I don't know any men who are saying, "I feel sad." I don't know. Those men were not in my space. So I just thought this was rubbish. So, excuse me. I then went out of my way to prove them wrong. I didn't know I had hyperfocused ADHD at the time, but I used that superpower, and I just became obsessed with the numbers. And what I found was alarming. What I found was what I believed to be true about suicide was much worse than I thought it was. All suicide is bad. The numbers in suicide across the board are horrendous. We lose somebody in the world every 40 seconds to suicide, and that's a World Health Organization stat. But when you also know that most countries, a lot of countries, especially ones with high populations, are not reporting their suicides properly, we can only believe that number is higher. So then when I zeroed my scope into the UK and saw the numbers there, I was absolutely blown away. You said it earlier on, 3/4 of all suicides are men. In 2023, I was still waiting for the stats that I'm comfortable with for 2024, so I'm still working on 2023 stats. We lost 6,069 people to suicide. That's 16 a day. 12 of those were men. So that blew my mind. I thought, well, why is that happening? Why is this happening? And so then when you think that men are dying at 3 times the rate of women, I was like, well, why is that happening? And then that opened up another avenue, because what I also then discovered that women are attempting suicide 3 times more often than men, but are not dying at the same rate. So why is that happening? And it just opened up all these reasons, like the gender health gap, societal stigma, generational gender bias, cognitive dissonance, which ultimately just led me to know that there is lots and lots of support out there for men and women to get the help they need if they are having thoughts of suicide, or if they are dealing with factors that often lead to thoughts of suicide. And what we know is that most women will reach out to those support networks. And we know that most men will not. There's this huge divide. There is thousands of men out there with thoughts of suicide. We know that it's about 1 in 20 people in the UK are having thoughts of suicide. That's 5% of the population. And we know from the men in that space, they are less likely to reach out and get help. They won't go to safe spaces. They won't go through open door policies. For all of those reasons I described, that's why they're silent. So I thought, right, enough is enough. How do I reach people like me? And that's when I had, we're going to create Tough to Talk. And I didn't even know how I was going to do that. Even I knew all of that. So we took about a year to figure out how we're going to do that. I know you didn't ask me this question. I can't do it. Just keep babbling.
No. Keep going. Once you finish, I'm going to pull you back and we're going to deep dive and unpick some stuff you said. So keep going.
So we took about a year to figure out, well, where do we sit? Well, we didn't want to be. We know that there's lots of care out there: primary care, secondary care, the third sector, peer support groups like Andy's Man Club, and all these other places for people to go and get the support they need. So we had to figure out, well, why are men not going to get those? So how do we affect those men? How do we get them to go into those spaces? And I will say, just as about that support that's out there, we know there's lots of support. We all have opinions about how good it is, and it's sometimes it's a postcode lottery to how good the support is for you. So regardless of that, there is support. So what we have then is all of these men who are not there. So what we decided to do was we weren't going to deal with men directly. I mean, we do, but not by design. We have a great support page for people who are struggling, for men who are struggling, and for those who support men who are struggling. We have an amazing support page with very action-orientated stuff they can go and do to support themselves or support people they care about. And we know that we deliver, training and content and talks And I deliver on average probably about 2 suicide interventions every month with the work that we do with the public. But overall, we said we're not going to work with men. What we need to do is change culture, change the dialogue. So we work with, we serve 2 masters. One is any male-centric space, manufacturing, construction, uniform services, youth, sports, anywhere where it is male-centric. And we serve organizations that support vulnerable men. So an example of that would be like SJOG, which is a suicide prevention charity for autistic men, because a lot of people don't know that autistic men are 7 times more likely to die by suicide. So they had to have a charity. So we support them through training and content to help them reach those men better. And what we do is we go into those spaces and we change cultures from the top down, bottom up, from the leadership team who have to lead this all the way down then to the people in the organization, through the language they use, the tone of voice, the marketing, the training, and creating an army of tough talkers, creating great leaders, leaders who are well, who are helping those who are not well. That's a great, I love the phrase, you got to fix the roof while the sun is shining. Don't wait for it to rain. So let's connect with those men who are well. Let them understand what the problem is to support those people in their spaces who are not, through great leadership and training and so on. Sorry, I'm going on. I'm on a rant.
No, honestly, but again, this shows the passion. And I said before we started, like, you're very passionate about what you do, and that's very evident to hear. So like I said, I wanted you to roll with it, and it's absolutely fantastic. I just want to link back to some of the stuff you said, because you covered a lot. And like I said, first of all, I want to say thank you for being so open and vulnerable by sharing your story. Like, again, every time I share my story, it never gets any easier. But again, you just kind of, you've said enough times, it kind of just words come out, but it still doesn't get any easier. So I do appreciate that. You spoke about wearing a mask, and I know exactly what that feels like. I say that, again, functioning depressant. So the stat that you said, about 80% of them being functioning, that was me. I was a functioning depressant, and I had no idea. And every day I put on this mask, pretended I was okay, and it just gets heavier and heavier and heavier. So I know exactly what you mean by that. But for people who don't really understand that, they've not experienced it themselves, what does that actually look like? And how can friends and family members potentially spot the signs? Because this is the thing here, isn't it? We're trying to, and again, I know that it's hard because people are so good at masking, but are there signs, are there things from what you've done, as in with your charity, that you've noticed that people can spot?
Yeah. So the mask is a tough one, because if someone's wearing a mask and they're really so convincing, where are the signs? You're going to find it very difficult to talk about signs. So I'll talk about the signs in a moment. But the mask, some people might be thinking, well, I don't understand how the mask gets there. Why do they think it's a good idea to wear this mask? Why are they not seeing other options to demonstrate that level of vulnerability? And so we wear the mask, especially in men, because often we have this generational gender bias, which is fed into us from our grandfathers to our fathers, fed into us. We feed it out to our brothers. We feed it into our sons, about what it is to be a man. Most men are brought up to believe, what is your value? What is your purpose? But they don't say those words. What they say is, what will you be when you grow up? What will you be when, what kind of man are you going to be? We're brought up to be strong, stoic, a provider, and silent. And you see this all the time. And an example that I use is, often we see a young boy fall over and start crying. And then somebody they respect, a role model, lifts them up, stands them up, and says something like, it doesn't hurt, you're okay, you'll be fine, run it off. And what we've taught that young boy when we say things like that is, their pain is not important, because they're going, I am in pain, this does hurt, but I respect you, you're my role model, and you're telling me that it doesn't hurt, so I shouldn't feel that. Okay, got it. Then they see maybe a girl fall over and they're picked up and they're cuddled. And they go, I totally got it now. My pain is important, their pain is important. So it's examples of that happens all the time through generational gender bias, that stigma, that stoic nature that gets fed into us. So we have this mask up, because I mustn't show pain, I mustn't show vulnerability, because what I'm feeling isn't important. It's what do I bring to the table that is important. What my purpose and value as a man is what's important. That's how I am defined. And then you couple that with cognitive dissonance, because what we have is we have a whole nation of amazing men. And when we say to them, if I'm in trouble, if I'm struggling with something, what should I do? You can guarantee that almost every man will say to you, speak to someone, find help, do this. Have you thought about this? How about this for a solution? Have you heard about these people? But then you turn it back onto them and say, brilliant, thank you for your help. Now let's help you. What's going on in your life? Most men will go, oh no, I'm fine. That cognitive dissonance, knowing what the right thing is to do, but actually choosing not to do it for fear of vulnerability and stigma, that happens an awful lot. So it's no surprise that we have this mask. You have a look at I'm going to go on a massive rant now about social media and the media. I will challenge anybody listening to this podcast to show me in the last 20 years a positive male role model from television who wasn't either the bad guy, who wasn't a nice guy, so therefore friend zoned, and nobody wants to be that guy, or an unrealistic expectation of man like John Wick. I'll challenge anyone to find me a positive male role model. I was given one the other day as I think it's the grandfather or the father in Kung Fu Panda, and I'm not sure how relative that is, right? But then you have a look at the media. You look at social media. If our listeners want a really good thought experiment, if you have a partner at home of the opposite sex, swap phones for half an hour and go through each other's either Instagram or TikTok and go through each other's For You pages. And what you'll see is very different messaging for men. The algorithms for men are designed specifically for their gender, and it will be people doing dangerous activities, people doing crazy funny stuff. It will be, for some reason, hot girls in yoga pants trying to sell you a laptop or something. All right, it's very different to what females are getting. A lot of women, when they go on their For You page, are getting positive affirmations. A lot of the time is go girl, stick it to the man, you don't need them, smash the glass ceiling, okay, all these really great positive messages. And it's a very different look. And then you couple that with what young men are going through, the youth who are coming through school, going into college, and they're on social media. Who are their role models? Well, if you've got Andrew Tate and the likes of him getting lots of media space, and the algorithms love him and love pushing his content, if you've got people like that pushing out to the youth who are very susceptible to messaging, we have a problem. And we work in a lot of colleges. We go to a lot of colleges and a lot of sixth forms and schools to talk to young men. And it breaks my heart because I hear a lot of young men using the word masculinity only with a precursor of toxic or fragile. They're that masculinity on its own isn't a superpower, isn't what makes us great. They're learning early doors that if I'm masculine, I must be toxic or fragile. And that's really bad messaging. And when they see things from Andrew Tate, you see, one of Andrew Tate's messaging, which really relates with young men, is pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Ignore what everybody else is talking about. If it doesn't suit your messaging, go your own way. Men, go your own way. Stick it to everyone else. Don't care what anybody else says. So when you've got disenfranchised young men hearing this message, they go, yeah, that makes sense. I don't need anybody else, I don't fit in that model. I don't fit in that model. I don't feel comfortable here. But actually what he's saying, I feel comfortable with. And then you get young men saying, well, I like what Andrew Tate says. And then society condemns that young man. What are you talking about? You must be a misogynist. You must hate women. You must be all of these things. And then you close that young man down, as opposed to saying, well, what is it you like about Andrew Tate? I like what that messaging about doing it, going your own way. Well, brilliant. Let's build on that. Andrew Tate also says these other things. Have you heard those? Oh no, well, I don't like those things. Okay, fine. Well, let's take the nice things that you heard about Andrew Tate and let's go and find the other things in the world that's really good. But we're just closing young men down. And so it's no surprise that we have millions of men in the UK wearing this mask, and the reason you said earlier, what does it feel like? Well, it feels like protection. It feels like I'm protecting myself from having to feel the things that society tells me I can't feel. And that's what it feels like until it gets to breaking point. And then that's a real problem. And then you asked me about signs. I know that was a really long-winded answer, but you asked me about signs. Now, when we're talking about signs, in the training that we provide, we talk about what do you see, hear, and know about people around you. What do you see? And we know that in men, we're going to find it very difficult to see things in most men. But we might see them acting in a particular way. So we might see them self-harming. And self-harming might not be that they're hurting themselves, but self-harming might be that they start relying on alcohol or drugs. They may start self-harming because they're that guy who keeps getting into fights. They might be the guy
sex is a big one. And this thing for me, sex was a massive one for me. And that's something I really had to realize, because I was using sex as a form of self-harm. And people are like, what do you mean? And then I explained it to them like, oh yes, yeah, I was abusing my body. Like it wasn't. But again, as a man, you're seen as like, oh, lad, like Stephen Lewis people. It's like, no. But the whole point of it was that it was coming from a really negative place, and I was doing it to abuse my body, and I didn't realize. But that's such a key one that people don't realize, because as a man, sex is, oh yeah, the more sex you have, you're more masculine, blah blah blah. And I always say, no, that was such a big key thing for me that I didn't even realize was a form of self harm.
No, absolutely. Men do use sex as a way of self-harm, but it's because they get that immediate gratification of their value, their worth.
Exactly.
Another way you might see a man self-harming as well is through work. They bury themselves into work, and when they get asked, why are you working so hard? Well, actually, because I am the provider. The better I do here, the better everybody else is, and then I don't have to face up to the things that I'm feeling and I'm going through. And so you might see those things, and then you might hear men say certain things. And this is really difficult to find something that a man is saying. I said before, I would love it if men said they were sad. I would love it if men said, I'm feeling really low, I'm thinking about dying by suicide. I would love that, because then we can have the conversation, but they don't. So often it's things that are out of context, either for that environment or maybe for them themselves. So they might say something like, they might be in the work environment, might say something like, well, home life is shit, work is shit, that's why I do this. And because we've all experienced that, especially men, most people see solutions in people who look like them. So they'll often say that to other men. And other men will often be sat there going, God, I know how he feels. Sometimes my home life and my work life is shit, yeah. And instead of going, why is your shit? They just go, yeah, I know what you mean. And that's as far as the conversation goes. We might hear something like, you might have John, who always goes out on a Thursday night with you, but on this night he says, no, not tonight, I'm not feeling it. And instead of saying, what are you not feeling? We'll go, no worries, John, we all feel like that sometimes. I'll see you next week, or I'll see you tomorrow. And we miss it. And often we miss it because of that fear. If I ask him about this and he tells me something, how am I going to react? How am I going to handle that? How am I going to react to that? And often they're not being really obvious with telling you stuff because they've got a fear of how you'll react to it. And so there's this, again, it's all this masking. So it's very difficult to hear somebody say something. So in both of those cases, it's very difficult to see stuff and hear stuff. So you have to be really acute to it. Our best weapon is, what do we know? What do we know about other people? So our best weapon to spotting signs is take interest in other people in your space. No one's asking you to go to work and gain new best friends or anything else like that, but be interested in those people around you, right? And be aware of what's going on. You might have heard of the phrase familiarity breeds contempt, right? So sometimes we're so close to people in our families, we're so familiar with what they're going through, that we don't spot new signs because they're just all part of the same familiarity. We're familiar with this environment. We have to be better at knowing what's going on with other people. So an example would be, I go for brunch every Friday with the same group of people. We've done it since COVID because Boris Johnson said it would be good for our mental health. But we've never spoken about mental health. We're all the husbands and boyfriends of all our wives and girlfriends, and we kind of thrust ourselves together during COVID, and we still meet each other. We've never spoken about mental health, but I can tell you what bikes we ride. I can tell you when the plum porter is on our local. I can tell you all of those things. And sometimes I come home and my partner says to me, "How's Dave?" And I go, "Well, Dave's fine." And she goes, "Well, how do you know?" I said, "Well, when I saw Dave, I shook his hand, asked him how he was doing, and he said, I'm fine." And she said, "Well, Dave's not fine. Dave has just had a negative result on his PSA test. And he's also just found out his mum's just been diagnosed with dementia." So what do I know now? Well, I know that a friend of mine is now worried about his prostate and is also worried about his mum. So he's now got that on his shoulders, and he chose not to tell me. And this is how easy it is to miss or dismiss things. An interesting fact is that most men who die by suicide, according to the coroner, reach out to at least one person in the 6 weeks before they die, and it's missed or dismissed. And this missing and dismissing is causing us real problems. So I've now got Dave, who I know this about. I could easily dismiss this now and go, "Well, if Dave wanted me to know, Dave would have told me." Or I could go, "Well, I'm seeing Dave next Friday. Dave can tell me then." Well, I can't guarantee Dave will be there next Friday. So I've already missed it because I never asked him how he was going on in his life at the meal, at the breakfast. And I could easily dismiss this now for various reasons because I'm scared. I'm fearful of him telling me to mind my own business. I'm fearful that actually he might tell me something that I will struggle to handle. So that sucks. No, get over that. Get over yourself. We're fellow human beings. Now I know that. Go and ask them about it and speak to them. All right. Take time to engage with them. And so that's our best weapon is what do we know about other people? Take interest in other people. Help them find solutions.
So I'm just going to jump back to one thing you said, and I'm going to go back to Carrie because again, I love it when you go off, Steve. It's fantastic. So I said it's just gold, and I don't want to interrupt you because you're in such a flow and you're just adding so much value. So I'm letting you roll with it. I think the really interesting thing you said about Andrew Tate. I think that's so key because I did the exact same thing. So I'd never heard of Andrew Tate, and I kept going to schools, and these kids would ask me, "What do I think of Andrew Tate?" So I had to go and do my own research into him. And much like yourself, I liked a lot of stuff that he said. I thought this is really good. I then found a lot of stuff I didn't like. So because I knew both sides of the story, I could meet the students where they were, exactly as you said. You're right. I really like what he said here. What do you like about it? Why do you like it? And then you can also make them aware of the negative side. I didn't know that. Okay, well, now you do. Oh, I don't agree with that. Perfect. And again, it's not just Andrew Tate, it's all the other people that are of that ilk that are almost, and again, I use this word lightly, almost too masculine. Because I feel like nowadays, masculinity, as you said, is a dirty word. So now people are crying out for masculinity. So it's created a gap in the market for social media men to be overtly masculine. Again, you had the Liver King, for another example. Again, just over the top, like just lying to his audience. But again, some of the stuff he said, I do agree with. But just shutting it down straight away is never a positive way for getting the result that you want. So it's listening and understanding rather than just dismissing. So I just want to sort of just put a bow on that because I really agree, and I think it's a really key thing. Rather than just hearing the name Andrew Tate, it triggering something in you and then you shutting it down, meet the person where they're at, guide the conversation where you want it to go. I think it's really key. And then the second thing we talk about there, when again, talking to your friends, finding all the information, gathering information, what do we know? I'm going to play devil's advocate here. What if you don't have a partner that knows Dave's situation to sort of fill you in? So you go to the pub, you meet Dave, and Dave's fine. Should you take it on surface value that Dave is always fine and it's just Dave and he will tell me? Should I start to be nosy? Should I start to be inquisitive? Oh, what about your parents, Dave? Or what about your job? If then Dave dismisses that, should I keep pushing? Should I then try and text him later on so he doesn't feel awkward? Or should I share a vulnerable story about myself in hope that Dave will then open up? Do you see where I'm going with this? So if we don't have that insight into Dave, what do we do?
It's like you've queued me up. It's like you've queued me up for... because this is what Tough Talk does. In changing cultures, you have to take interest in other people. So as role models, so within organizations, we create tough talkers who are at one end trained in suicide intervention, but also suicide prevention by dealing with factors that often lead to thought suicide. And they do that by we handpick these men, by the way. They're not volunteers. We choose the men in the organizations based on the fact that they may be a leader of men in that space or a natural influencing leader in that space, to make sure that they've already got the ear of the people around them. And yeah, they talk about their own issues openly and how they've solved them, and they engage with conversations with people who are engage with people, to find out what's going on in their lives. Now, what you'll find is that in most cases, in almost every case, if you're a man, you engage with another man, you say, "How's your parents?" Or tell me a little bit more about this. How's it looking at work and stuff? How do you feel about that? In most cases, men will respond to you because actually they've not been asked properly before. And now they're having a conversation with somebody, okay, and it becomes normal. And the reason why we create these tough talkers is that they normalize those conversations. And over a period of time, everybody's doing it because it becomes normal, because no one's preventing them. No one's, the barriers they thought were there are not there. No one's mocking you. No one's going at you. Of course, there are environments that are quite toxic. So in a lot of male-centric spaces, there are toxic environments where I've heard people go, I'm not feeling great at the moment. I've got this problem. And then from the other corner of the room, you hear, "Oh, what's the matter, you big girl? What, you need a cuddle?" Okay. But if you then, so you have to change those cultures, change those environments, that actually everybody else jumps on that guy then and says, "You've got nothing to say," and let's use our masculinity as a force of good and jump on that guy. But yeah, you're right. So I would find that you don't have to be a tough talker to do this. You just have to be a man and have to care enough to ask your fellow men about it. So going back to the brunches, I now ask all the time. And what you find is every Friday at brunch now, the conversation always goes back to, "Oh, how did you get on with that issue?" Or, "How did you get on with that problem?" So it becomes a normal conversation, and it just becomes a self-fulfilling support network, okay, that is natural. We know so much more about each other now because we have these conversations and we check in on each other as well. So later on, I might send a WhatsApp call, a text or something, and it just grows. But it's just that getting the ball rolling is the hardest part.
I completely agree with this as well, because I remember doing a talk for, again, I'm not going to mention the company name, but a lot of tradesmen. So there's about 20 tradesmen in the room. Again, big burly men, typical tradesmen. Shared my story. And then at the end, the guy was like, "Yeah, but Dan, you don't understand." And again, started telling me about, again, how his granddad used to beat his dad used to beat him. And blah, blah. I basically was talking about how to break this generational thing. And again, this guy was in his late 40s, 50s. And before I could say a word, somebody else in the room chirped in and started talking to him. And then somebody else joined in. And I just sat back, and then suddenly there's these guys just talking. And I sat there getting goosebumps thinking, this is what it's all about. I think a lot of guys want that space to talk. They just don't have them. And I feel like, again, that's a societal thing at the minute, because back in the day, again, men weren't necessarily open to talking, but they had the spaces to talk with other men and interact. Whereas nowadays, I feel like that's a bit of a lost space. Again, becoming quite reclusive, especially since lockdown. And on that point, I just want to sort of tie it into younger generation, teenagers, for example, that maybe don't have that tight-knit group of friends now, because as we know, at our age, your friends when you're in your teens and early 20s might not be your friends when you're in your 30s, 40s, or the connections aren't that deep. It's very surface level. So how do we approach this? Maybe someone listening that's got a teenage boy that maybe is a bit of a recluse, doesn't have any sports teams, obviously can't go down to the pub, or maybe let's say he's 19, but he doesn't have that group of mates. What does that child do? What does that young teen, what does that young adult do when they don't have that group of men around them to ask the questions, when he doesn't have that space to vocalize how he feels? What's the sort of the best approach for that, both from him, what should he do, and also then maybe a parent or concerned friend?
So so for him, if that young man is open to conversations and open to explore new avenues, then help him understand what is available to him. So from our Virgin Active days, remember we used to always talk about your tribe is your vibe, right?
Yep.
And I still believe in that. You are as strong as your tribe. So find a tribe that works for you. So where do we help that boy find that young man? Where do we find his spaces? So first of all, does he know? Because sometimes it is a lack of knowledge. I don't know what's available to me. I don't know who's willing to talk to me. Help them find out what do they know. If you're caring for a young man that you're really, really worried about, my first thing is just don't give up. Be consistent with the messaging of support to that person. Even if they got their mask up, okay. Even if they're going, I'm fine, I'm absolutely fine. You go, okay, gotcha. But also, don't be worried about sharing your fears for them. And I always say that if you could just always start to, whenever you start a difficult conversation with somebody or a conversation you're worried about, always start with what you've seen, heard, or know about them, okay, and that you bringing this up because you care and you want to know that they're okay, because the chances are they will open up to you and say, just to put your mind at rest, just to make you feel better, they'll do it, right? They'll just go, okay, I understand. Yeah, I understand why you're asking me, but actually, really, I am okay. So I'll give you an example. Our youngest boy, he's 21 now, but up until recently, his whole community was online. Gaming and Discord and all of these things. And it wasn't until he helped us understand that actually what he was doing was actually really social, because he's a photographer, he's a designer, and he does all of those things, and that's where his network was. And so he wasn't in any danger, but it took me to go and find that out. But had he not been that, I would have encouraged him to be more social and engage with groups and people around him. If I was worried about somebody and I knew the groups that he was part of, I may approach them and say, what is it we can do to help support him much better? But yeah, so the real key is be consistent. Find out what they know. Start with that. Start with how are they feeling and what do they know, and build on that. And just be consistent with caring. Don't ever give up.
Love that. Again, I think it's a real powerful thing as well, like that, not giving up, and also be ready, because I think for me it's also when people are opening up, it has to be on their time, not your time. So it's like if they're willing to open up and share, and you've said to someone, I say, not even if it's a son, I'm talking about friends as well. I always say to people, which kind of ties me on to my next question, but I always say to people, because one of the biggest questions that I get asked is, how do I support someone that's struggling? And I will say, because I say, I'm there for them. And so if you tell someone that's struggling that you're there for them, you actually have to mean that you are there for them, even if it's in the middle of the night. It can't be on your time. It has to be on their time, which then ties me into what we sort of said here about, you mentioned that most men that die by suicide only reach out to one person in 6 weeks before. So what would that look like? And again, I'm not saying there's a blueprint of this is the message you're going to get, but what I don't want people to do is be that person that someone reached out to 6 weeks later, it happens, and then they beat themselves up because they didn't know. So what should we be listening out for? How do we respond properly when someone maybe does open up? And then follow on from that, how do we respond to that person if we aren't in the place at that particular time to handle it? Because again, we're human beings. Some days we are struggling ourselves, that we're not in a place to receive that. So what can we do in those three sort of situations?
Okay, so on the third situation, you're talking about if they're in the act of attempting to die by suicide.
Well, let's say the message is very blatant of, hey, Steve, I am really struggling. I'm feeling really low and I'm thinking of doing something stupid. And that person isn't in, like they're the person they've sent it to isn't in the best headspace themselves. And they think they're maybe thinking, I can't deal with that right now. So maybe they don't respond. Like how am I making sense with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So say, for example, you have picked up signs, something you've seen, heard, or know about that person, and you're genuinely worried. When dealing with most men, saying that you're there for them or call me anytime, I'm here for you, means nothing. All of that means nothing because they know you are. But they then have to actually take action on that, and they're unlikely to do that. So my advice would be is to shift the conversation to them and say, I'm phoning now. I'm on my way around. Actually be there, be present, be there. And then focus on the things that you've seen, heard, or know and get them talking. Now, at this point, anybody who's doing this, even though I've had training, I'm an assessor tutor for suicide prevention and intervention, right? So I know exactly what to say and when to say it. And even though I still do this, it still terrifies me. I still have that, oh, wow, this is happening. Okay, so now I'm in this space. So if you've had no training, you're going to have that fear. So my advice would be get them talking. It doesn't matter what you say. And know this, it is a myth that talking about suicide or factors that often lead to thoughts of suicide is going to make it worse or put the idea in their head. Not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But talking about it, you have every chance of saving a life. So get them talking and just get them to talk about what it feels like for it to be them. What does it feel like to be you? You know? And it doesn't have to be all hairy fairy and namby pamby or anything else like that. Straight talking, dude, that sucks. And whatever they tell you, agree with them. Agree with them that it sucks, right? Because I've had moments where someone's told me something and I've thought to myself, why are you even worried about that? That's not, that's not a real thing, right? That's not something to be worried about in my head. But knowing full well that to them it is everything. Tell me how it feels to be you. Wow, that must be awful. How does that make you feel each day? Oh man, you're right. You're right. That sucks. Put your phone away, give them all of your attention. Let them just talk themselves out. Because it is true that problem shared is a problem halved. When you do voice things out of your own head, because a lot of these men, the only person they're talking to is them. They are in their own echo chamber. So they are confirming all of the biases that they have, right?
Mm-hmm.
As soon as they get it out and they say it out loud, a lot of the time they go, I can't believe I've just said that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe I feel this. So let them talk themselves out and then ask them where they think they can find the solutions. You don't have to know all the answers. Okay, well, how can we help you fix this? What's the next step? Okay, so you're going to do this, we're going to do this, and then do that. And then if you're not trained to have this difficult conversation with them or do the next thing, then point them in the right direction. All right. Whether that be their GP, whether that be, maybe someone to call like the Samaritans. I'm a massive fan at the moment of talking services through the NHS. They used to be absolute garbage, but they've had an overhaul and they've had a bit of a snap. And so, when they phone up those talking services, and the reason why I love talking services so much is that they're completely anonymous, and so you can talk their ears off and they'll advise you and listen to you and all those things. But say, for example, you do get through to them or they get through to you and say, listen, I want to take this further. I want to let your GP know about this conversation. I want to find you more support. Then brilliant. Whereas organizations like the third sector charities, they can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like So help them find a solution and then keep checking in with them. You don't have to actually do that much. Your role is to notice and get them to open up and get them to let you know what it feels like to be them.
Mm.
And then you'll find the solutions will just come. So that's dealing with the difficult conversation. But then I would always check in on them. You don't have to fix their problems for them. You just need to know that they're doing what they should be doing.
When it comes to just another thing on that, what should we be listening out for? So to that person that does reach out, they've reached out to that one person, is it normally the one person that they know to reach out to? So let's say, for example, I'm struggling and I know, right, Steve's my guy, like Steve's my best mate. Is it normally that they reach out to Steve, or do they normally reach out to Ben that isn't the close friend, but so what we're trying to get at here is, if someone receives a random message from a person, is there something that they need to be listening out for, looking out for? Is there a sign that this message is a call for help? Because I'm assuming that most of the time they don't say, hey, I am really struggling right now and need some urgent help. I'm assuming that's not the message. It will kind of potentially be cryptic. So is there something that we can look out for or listen out for?
Oh my gosh, I wish I could give you an honest answer. Like we said before, about most men reach out to at least one person in 6 weeks before they die. And you're right, that person is likely to find out through the coroner's report that they were the person that missed or dismissed it. And it sucks for that person, because if they do find out, then they got to live with that. And so we know that for every suicide, there's about, we think it's around about 15 people who will be directly affected emotionally and mentally. And those people are X amount of times more likely to have thoughts of suicide themselves. So we know that it's a massive ripple effect that is a real problem, right? So nobody wants to be that person. So for us to avoid being that person, then we have to be interested in those people who are around us, because we know that most people see solutions in people who look like them. So men is so first point is if another man in your life is struggling, it's likely to be you or a man like you in their lives they're going to reach out for, right? We also know, sadly, that most men are going to be really vague in how they do this. I mean, if you're lucky enough to have men who are really in touch with their feelings and emotions and are able to engage with you, then brilliant. But the chances are they're so in touch with their feelings and so engaged that they don't need you in the first place, right? It's those who are the hard to reach ones. So my advice would be just be interested in the men who are around you. Don't be the guy who's missing these opportunities. Listen out for anything that is out of context for that environment or out of context for that person's life. What do you know about those people? And then approach them, have these conversations with them. It's really important. I hope that's answered the question.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's very difficult.
Like I said, it is. I know there's no one size fits all. And what I'm trying to do with this whole episode here is there is no one size fits all. There's no blueprint of, right, Dan, this is what it is. Like, this is it. Just read this blueprint. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to hit it from as many different angles as I possibly can. So people listening to this in all different situations can pick up a little nugget of, that's me. That's my situation. Oh, yeah, I know a Steve. Oh, I know a Dan. I know a Ben. Perfect.
Well, this is why it's so important. This is why it's so important that we're trying to change those cultures in those male-centric spaces. So more men are role modeling those conversations openly, because we know that the gender health gap, and if you look at the gender health gap, there's various Lancet journals and studies done by different universities. What the gender health gap shows us that, and we're talking now, when I'm talking about most men and most women. Most women will ask for help. Most women will offer help, and men are the opposite. So if people are wondering why it's such a struggle, it's that we know that most women will be asking and getting the help they need, okay, whereas most men won't be doing those things. And because we're not offering help and we're not asking for help, most men are just silently plodding along, assuming that everybody else is okay and assuming that everybody else isn't feeling like they do. So actually the best thing we can do as men, the most masculine thing that we can do as men, okay, is engage with our fellow men, is to have these difficult conversations, share when I'm feeling crap, okay, and then listen to those people in my life who might be feeling crap too. That's the most masculine thing that I can do.
And I'm going to flip this for women that are frustrated that the men in their life, again, it could be a brother, it could be a dad, or it could be their partner, and they're getting really frustrated. There's like, yeah, but they don't talk. Steve, you don't understand. They just don't talk. They don't open up. How can a woman approach talking to a male in their life? Again, even if it's a friend, family member, partner, whatever it is, how can they approach it? Because as I said, women are very, and again, I think it's definitely like growing up, women are a lot more open. And I always say with women, it's a double-edged sword because they talk so much and share their feelings so much that sometimes you actually don't know when they are struggling. Because sometimes like the boy that cried wolf. But for the guy that's like sat there, not opening up, and the woman's trying desperately to, again, be vulnerable. She's trying to, how should a woman approach this? Should they get a guy involved? Like, what should a woman do in that situation?
Yeah, getting the guy involved is second. First of all, if you're a woman, you're worried about a man, and he's a traditional man, maybe behind the mask, and he doesn't really engage about emotions and feelings. So if that's your man, don't talk about feelings and emotions. Don't talk about vulnerability. Don't tell them that you're worried about their mental health. Don't even start the conversations like that. Because we know from the various studies that we've read that most men don't see the issues that they're having as an emotional issue or a mental health issue. They always see physical issues. They know when they've gone over on their ankle, right? But they don't see those mental issues or emotional issues. It's not in their language repertoire, most of these men. So don't use them. Don't use that space, right? Most men see issues that they're having as problems that they need to solve, right? So when their wife leaves them, their problem is, how do I get my wife back? When they lose their job, my problem is, how do I find another job and feed my family? Not how do I feel about that mentally? How am I emotionally dealing with this? It's a problem they have to solve. So I always say to women, if you want to engage with your man, give them a problem to solve. Okay? Their purpose, their value in this world is probably you, right? So say to them, listen, this is what I've seen. and I'm worried. Okay, help me understand, why you're doing this. Because then all of a sudden the problem for them is, how do I make my wife feel better about this?
Mm.
Okay, and if you are precise with what you want as a solution, which is, I need to understand, how you're feeling about this. Right. So, this is, so say, for example, you have, you're supporting your male partner who's grieving the loss of a parent. And you say to them, tell me how you feel about it. This has got to be really emotional for you. It's got to be, that is not going to work. But saying to them, listen, grief sucks. All right. This is really awful. Right. Help me understand what it feels like to be you right now and how I can best support you. You have now given them a problem to fix. How do I help you understand what I'm going through and help support me?
And what if you get one word answer and it's just like, I don't know, for example? Because again, for some guys, their natural response to that would be, I don't know. Would you then just, well, can you try? So again, trying to coax it out of them, do you leave it?
Yeah, well, let's also understand, I've used that as an example, but grief is a very difficult one to, maybe I shouldn't have used grief as a massive example, because actually when people are grieving, regardless of sex and gender, they'll often go very quiet. They're going through a range of emotions through, anger and so on as they go through the grief. So that might be not a great example, but the key message is be consistent. What do I see, hear, and know about you? I care. I'm worried about you. Help me understand what it is like to be for you, right? If you're consistent in your messaging, you will get through to that person. And then we spoke before about having male role models in their space. There is nothing wrong. I don't think there's anything wrong with approaching, male friends, maybe family role models, and saying, listen, I'm really worried about them. Would you talk to them? That's absolutely fine. They don't have to come in and say, your wife's worried about you. Right? They're going to come in, and say, listen, this is what's happened. You're grieving, or you've lost your job. That's another massive grief event. You might be worried about money. You might be worried about these things. Listen, what does it feel like to be you right now? What should we do? How can we help you? Just show people you care. We used to talk about this a lot, where we say no one cares what you know until they know that you care, right?
Yep.
If you're going to a person who is struggling from a position of knowledge, I know how to fix this. They don't give a shit. They don't care what you know. Show them that you care. I'm worried about you, buddy. Listen, we can talk about absolutely anything, or we can talk about nothing. But ultimately, this is what I'm seeing, and I would love to know what it means to be you right now. Okay, and then listen and listen, and once they know that you care, they'll be open to solutions. And if you're not trained in doing suicide intervention, don't even attempt that. But if you are brave enough to ask the question, are you having thoughts of suicide? Ask it. Okay. And you'll be panicky. You're worried about the answer. And if they say, yeah, I'm having thoughts of suicide, don't panic. Just ask them to tell you about it. Yeah. Tell me about that. And then you can get the support you need.
I'm going to put all the links down below as well. So if people do have that conversation, they can have that. And again, I'll link to your website as well, because I've checked it out. Obviously checked it out in the research into this podcast, but there's some fantastic resources on there, some really, really good resources. So the last thing I've got here, because obviously I'm very respectful of your time, and the value that you've added here, Steve, has been fantastic, is if there's one thing that every listener could take away from this conversation, what would it be?
It's to be brave and be consistent with and especially with the men around you. And what I mean by that is that, what do you see, hear, and know about the men around you? Okay. Be brave enough to have a conversation with them about a difficult subject and consistently show people you care. That's it. And if you're a man listening to this, you're going to find it a real challenge to show caring and being brave enough to speak to the men in your lives. But I promise you, that has much greater impact than them speaking to their GP, them speaking to the third sector. That being a man in another man's life, showing care and being brave enough to ask difficult questions, has the biggest impact.
I couldn't agree more than that. Some of the conversations and connections I've made in the gym started by me asking difficult conversations. So I could not agree more. Steve, where can people find out more about you? Where can they find out more about the charity? Where can people buy the book? Tell me everything. Like, here's your chance, because again, people will really resonate with this conversation. So I want people to reach out. I want people to find out more about the charity. So where can people go, and what does that look like?
No problem at all. So our shop window, if you like, is toughtotalk.com. On there, you'll find a support page for men, to very action orientated. There's me. That's what I'm feeling. I'm doing that. Do that. Brilliant. If you're worried about men in your life, you can go to our support page and find out how you can help support them better, which is amazing. But most importantly, business leaders, HR leaders in male-centric spaces or organizations that support vulnerable men, you can go to our website and see the services that we can provide to you. Everything from reframing and redesigning your marketing content to relate to men better, all the way through to talks and content on issues that lead to male suicide, and training for your tough talkers and so on. It's all on there. And, it costs nothing to pick up the phone. Let's just have a conversation and see how we can support your organization.
Honestly, I really appreciate that. And again, for me, it's... this conversation has been awesome. And again, it's something that's really close to my heart as well, personally. And to have the conversation with someone that, as I said, impacted me so greatly back in the day, it's been fantastic. And I've said it before, but I want to say again, thank you very much for being so open and vulnerable, sharing this. And also, not just with me, but with all the other people that you're sharing this information with. Again, we need more people talking, like you said. So you pioneering it and getting out there, I really do appreciate it. So thank you for spending the time with me and my audience today. It's been fantastic.
No problem at all. Thank you for your time, and thanks for helping share the message.